All right, take it away.
All right, welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today, SBTN, an integrated approach to nature action. My name is Nick Lund and I'm on the leadership team for ASCM San Diego Eco Sustainability Group, and I focus on finding knowledgeable professionals like Gokhan to keep us informed on sustainability best practices. On our leadership team, we also have Sandy Friedman here and Preston Blevins too. They have led the sustainability group at ASCM San Diego and made it what it is today. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Science Based Targets Network for connecting us with Gokhan. Without further ado, I'll introduce you to our speaker today out of Munich, Germany. Gokhan Guresier is a sustainability and environmental expert specializing in science-based approaches to corporate and urban environmental action. He supports the implementation of Science-Based Targets Network, SBTN, helping organizations set credible nature targets aligned with global frameworks. Gokhan brings a systems thinking approach to sustainability, focusing on climate, biodiversity, freshwater, land systems as the CEO of CarbonZ. He will start the presentation shortly. Please save any questions in the chat or save them on a note for the end of the session, and we will have a Q&A. I'd like to hand it over to Gokhan. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Nick. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm Gokhan. I'll be walking through an exciting initiative that connects climate and nature action in a practical, science-based way. And let's start by looking at who we are, what we do in SBTN, and what drives our work. We can go with next slides, please. Preston. So we can go to slide 6, please.
That was my goof. Hang on, please.
I don't see. We are still in 4 or?
Yeah, what happened was I moved my hand. Let me just go back and reshare.
Yes.
There we go. Slide 4. Okay, do you want me to advance?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. That's slide 6. Yeah. So the first thing first, I will tell you about like SBTN, what's our vision, what's our mission. So Science-Based Targets Network is a unique collaboration of like 80 leading global environmental nonprofits coming together, like WWF and international agencies like like CDP and mission-driven entities, a collective of all world's leading scientists and sustainability experts, actually. So we have come together to equip companies and cities with the guidance, tools, and methods they need to operate within Earth's limit. So Earth's limit is the key word here, while also meeting society's needs. So SBTN is one of 5 components that make up the Global Commons Alliance, which is GCA. GCA is a network of organizations working to ensure that societies and the global economy thrive, sustained by healthy global commons on a stable planet. And again, in the and navigating all the industry within the Earth's limit. So next slide, please. So it's kind of, yeah, it's an integrated action. We can go one more slide. So you might have already heard the Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTI for short. SBTI is an initiative for companies setting and implementing science-based targets for climate. So climate means emissions or carbon footprint. we are building on SBTI's momentum of like more than 6,000 companies that already set out science-based target for climate, for carbon emission. Yeah, there may be organizations here that have already set these targets. And the next slide, please. Yeah, but as much as we celebrate this momentum with 6,000 companies, it's also critical to note that we have collectively, as a society, we cannot achieve net zero without credible action on nature as well. Like they're both linked, not just because nature is climate's greatest ally, absorbing half of our carbon emissions in a year, but also nature is a foundation of our economy and our lives, and which is why the founding organizations of SBTR are also part of SBTN. So Science-Based Target Network, which is SBTN, develops science-based target for nature, both for companies and cities, municipalities, in other words, so they can comprehensively address their environmental impacts across land, water, ocean, biodiversity, beyond climate and carbon emission. So in general, companies that have already developed capabilities and collect data, activity data, and capacity to address their climate impacts can use the same data and foundations as a logical building blocks to start addressing their nature impacts. So currently in SBTN's corporate engagement program, there are around 160 companies preparing to set nature targets. All of them have already set out their climate targets. So if you haven't already engaged with SBTI, we encourage you to do first SBTI targets, and then with this foundation, to enlarge the scope through SBTN. So we can go to the next slide, I guess. So in this,
Okay.
the slide 10.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So SBTN provides an integrated approach, as you have seen in this slide, for companies to address their environmental impacts. So within SBTN, there are technical hubs. You can see there are 5 technical hubs here that cover 4 key action areas. These are freshwater, land, ocean, and biodiversity. So these 4 components complement the SBTI climate effort. So in total, they make 5 very important dimensions of nature. So for example, from irrigating crop fields to withdrawing water to cooling data centers, or other examples, like all companies depend on impact nature to various extents and various ways. Like companies here may be taking action on some of these impacts, but do they have a comprehensive understanding of all its impacts on nature, but not only climate? So these are the questions. What are the trade-offs, etc.? These are the questions. And if we could go to the next slides, we can understand more like literally. So what exactly do we mean by science-based targets? We can make this differentiation of science-based and targets words. So SBTN defines science-based targets for nature as measurable, actionable, and time-bound objectives based on the best available science that allow actors to align with Earth's limits and societal sustainability goals. So, next slide, 12, please. Thank you. Yeah. So what does this actually mean for companies? What does SBTN mean for companies? As I have already mentioned, every company impacts negatively nature and puts pressure on nature through their operations and activities across their value chains. So these pressures or negative impacts we can call are leading to a sixth mass extinction of life on Earth. So a kind of crisis paralleled by threats we are also facing from anthropogenic climate change, let's say. So what science-based targets for nature help companies do is enable them to measure their contributions to nature positive outcomes. By comprehensively assessing and prioritizing its environmental impacts, a company can take direct aim at these impacts through measurable, time-bound, and location-based targets kind of project in line with ecological thresholds and society goals. Oh, let's go to next slide so we can see who is helping to provide this guidance for companies. So the power of SBTN is that it's a network. There are lots of organizations. Most of them are nonprofit or governmental, and it's not a single organization. It's and SBTN's credibility comes from that coalitions, and it's kind of a coalition with key environmental organization, and is driven by a consensus-led approach among all of them. As previously mentioned, there are many founding organizations in SBTN formation, like recently SBTI, which is the biggest stakeholder probably, and also CDP, United Nations Global Compact, WWF, and World Resource Institute and World Economic Forum. They are the founding partners of SBTN. And let's go to the next slide. And together now we have built a coalition of over more than 80 environmental NGOs and mission-driven organizations to do this work. And there are like 160 pilot studies to make SBTN standards, try and go through the whole standard process and have SBTN experience already. So next slide, let's go for how we have generated the momentum. So there are like 17 pioneering companies and more than 20,000 data points is analyzed, and more than 160 companies, which corresponds to around $4 trillion market valuation cap, and in more than 30 countries. Yeah, next slide, please. I will not count all countries in here. Yeah, so the business value of SBTN, we can go one more slide, please. 17. Thank you. So companies might already be setting some type of targets, like it can strengthen corporate action and in turn further mitigate risk and increase resiliency. To highlight some examples, these targets are ambitious and quantifiable, and which means that, yeah, it's actually clear. So I will just scan through this slide. So the target setting process is rigorous and strategic, which means even companies that don't want to act often may not know what's good enough and how can end up setting ad hoc qualitative targets without a cohesive strategy. And also they are globally recognized and credible and independently validated. So like science-based targets can help companies address increasing stakeholder scrutiny and including from financial institutions, regulators, customers, yeah, consumers. Yeah, they provide a globally recognized standards framework. That's why most of the CDP, most of the ESG frameworks cite always SBTN, such as CSRD and TNFD and CDP. They cite SBTN as the quantification method. Also, SBTN is like science-based targets for nature. That is comprehensive. The approach requires all companies to assess their impacts across full value chain, including all purchases, also full value chain impact on both freshwater, terrestrial, land, ocean, everything. And they support a corporate reporting, which, as I've mentioned, it's aligned with all ESG frameworks. It's complementary with all ESG frameworks. And they're also location specific and time bound. Yeah, a single broad target for an entire company will not drive the right actions because one company might purchase, I don't know, coffee from Ethiopia and I don't know, banana from Africa. So this banana impact or coffee impact will be local on the resources in terms of water or land impact. Yeah, let's go to next slide. 18, thank you. So as well as being distinct from other targets, companies might be setting a unique target from other tools as well. So SBTN's approach is credible, comprehensive, and location-based and prescriptive. But also is practical and interoperable with all other frameworks. And the objective is to set out a common framework, which SBTI has achieved, like with greenhouse gas protocol together 10 years ago, let's say, like the previous decade. And now this decade, in general, the global objective is to set out the common framework for nature impacts on SBTN. So next slide, we can go. So what businesses have been saying about SBTN? We can see here, there are a lot of companies who have examined this. The standards, try that, and set targets. You can find it on SBTN resources page, web page. There are some public resources and testimonials from these companies. I don't want to go through the all codes here. We can go to next slide, maybe. Yeah, SBTN's interoperability with other frameworks and standards. Yeah, I think it's next slide, please. There's a three, yeah. So SBTN and science-based targets for nature do not ad hoc or isolated standard. It has intentionally designed and built. Its approach is to align what companies are already doing and very, very aligned with other ESG frameworks, especially the obligatory ones like CSRD in Europe. So SBTN therefore collaborates with many different organizations, yeah, the largest organic relation is probably SBTI and CDP, and also TNFD, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, is kind of TCFD. SBTI relation is copied here like SBTN, TNFD relation. So two standards and frameworks cite each other in many, maybe more than 100 times. So when companies implement SBTN's target setting process, they can use it as a way to advance in other frameworks as well, whichever they have chosen to report. For example, SBTN's approach provides a basis for companies to take the data they gather for target setting, or they can apply this to, as I've mentioned, European Union's CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Director, or TNFD disclosure, or CDP disclosures, any disclosures. In addition, it's important to note that science-based targets for nature, SBTN, directly support the achievement of many of components of the global biodiversity frameworks that can directly contribute to monitoring their progress. So this is obviously an ongoing collaboration. And for example, I know very closely that since as a company, we are automatizing CSRD disclosures. For example, there are only 90 questions about carbon footprint of the companies in environment chapter of CSRD, but there are 350 questions about biodiversity, water, and land impact in EU CSRD, for example. So SBTN is how you say, SBTN is very much complementary to all ESG frameworks, I will say. So next slide. So to looking specifically at our methods for assessing and prioritizing. So we have step 1 and 2, in which we assess and prioritize the impacts, and in step 3, we set targets. So there are different types of setting targets, as I've mentioned: ocean targets, water targets, land targets, biodiversity targets, etc. And in the next step, sorry, I can. There are different types of targets in step 3. If the company's impact and priorities are on land and terrestrial side, they need to set land targets. If it's more on freshwater side, they need to also set freshwater targets, for example. So there are 5 types of targets. 3 of them are already developed. These standards have already developed. And this year, all steps standards will be published. And next slide, please. Yeah, so here SBTN often ask the question how science-based targets for nature related to TCFD, TNFD, etc. It's useful to take a step back and to understand this visual hierarchy and relationships. And TNFD, SBTN is aligned with 100% with TNFD. And TCFD is 100% aligned with SBTI. So TCFD and SBTI are for climate and carbon footprint. TNFD and SBTN are for nature impacts like water, ocean, biodiversity, and land. So I guess this is the most important message of this slide. We can go more deeper, but for the sake of the time, I would like to pass to the next slide. So TCFD, climate, and SBTI. So SBTN corresponds to TNFD. So this is more or less the most important message of these slides. So we can look now in more detail about the relationship between SBTN and TNFD. So TNFD provides a framework of steps an organization should follow to understand all of its environmental relationship and how to manage them through its LEAP framework, like with the nature, the relationship of the organization with the nature. And SBTN, on the other hand, focuses on how to set appropriate targets for the future for action and forms a civil society driven process focused on managing environmental impacts. In other words, like TNFD provides a disclosure framework and SBTN provides a target setting standard for the future. So there's a close alignment and complementary relationship between TNFD and SBTN in terms of the conceptual framework and the definitions, indicators, like terminology is 100% aligned. One scientific word cannot mean something different in the other framework. So the data requirements and analytical outputs related are also very similar or the same. So recommendations to conduct local stakeholder engagements are also very aligning with each other. On the other hand, there are some different points, which might include like tools, approaches, type of data are required to set targets might be different from what is disclosed in TNFD. In SBTN, we might need more detailed, more granular data for example, for suppliers, for the location of the facility and which basin it is, between which river is it, what is the risk of drought, or what's the risk of water in general. So SBTN and TNFD has actually a common goal. A collective goal is to have an integrated approach as possible for companies looking to both set science-based targets for nature and disclose their risk. So together it's complementary, and you can, like when you hear TNFD, you can consider SBTN as the quantification baseline or foundation of TNFD, I would say. Yeah, next slide. This was. Thank you. Yeah, many of you have most likely heard European Union is setting new mandatory regulations, even though it's postponed. So it's applicable to organizations located in EU, like more than 250 employees. And as part of the development of the SBTN, EU directives also established the basic requirements and needs for assessment and disclosure of environmental impacts. So the objective of SBTN is to address and be the quantification baseline of all ESG frameworks, including EU CSRD. Yeah, we can go to the next slide, I guess. So SBTN is a key mechanism for companies to deliver global biodiversity framework. So global biodiversity framework is another framework, actually GBF, and SBTN is a key mechanism for companies to take action in global biodiversity framework. So just like EU CSRD. So the next slide also, how is our time? I'm checking our time. I've still 5 minutes, I guess. So science-based targets also, SBTN is also key mechanism for GBF, which is Global Biodiversity Framework. And especially when we release the version 1 guidance on stakeholder engagement, it was a significant step towards achieving both effective and equitable science-based targets for nature. So this guidance ensured that companies' target setting actions reverse natural loss, but also benefit the well-being of people in the long term, and as well as communities. So next slide. Now, I guess I can talk like 4 or 5 minutes about the implementation of target setting overview, how we do, what's the framework, how we start, how we end. One more, please, slide 29. Yeah, thank you very much. So we have a 5-step approach. In this 5-step, in the first step, we assess. We first make materiality screening and value chain assessment. And in second step, interpret and prioritize. So we set targets, boundaries, interpretation of each pressure and each state of nature, and then prioritize them. And then after prioritization, a certain percentage for each company, they need to set targets, like by making baseline pressure calculation, target setting, and then they can submit for validation to the organization. These 3 steps are already published, and 4 and 5 will be published this year. And in step 4 and 5, we act like how they make a roadmap, how to avoid, reduce, and restore, regenerate the nature and transform it. And in 5, it's kind of control step, which monitoring, reporting, and verification continues. So it's important to keep in mind that this process is very iterative for companies and but it really doesn't go that. It's very iterative, like when they are assessing one nature aspect, they might be measuring and setting targets on another aspect. But for prioritization, to make a good scanning of all suppliers and all impacts of the nature is required. So this process is quite iterative. On the other hand, it should be also comprehensive. Yeah, so let's go with the next slide. Yeah, I don't want to actually go to this technical details. It's about how implementation is done. And to be honest, there is no single company who is preparing for SBTN target setting without guidance. They either receive help from consultancies, consultants such as myself, companies like, or they are already involved in SBTN very much to the whole processes. So let's go to the next slide. And how many minutes I have? Nick, should I more or less
Five to
close?
10. You have 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So our first step is assess. So looking at to this methodology, as I have mentioned, we have 5-step methodology. You could almost think of this work as a funnel, like kind of starting from 1 to 3, actually, because 4 and 5 is more about roadmap and controlling and monitoring that. So these first 3 are very important and essential to do, actually. So all companies start their SBTN journey by assessing and starting with the step 1 by assessing their pressures and their suppliers' pressure. Unlike SBTI, SBTN from the day 1 took supplier as an obligatory component of the whole methodology. So companies first screen on their impacts on nature and then their suppliers. So this material to screening is done according to 2 different frameworks, actually IPBES framework, and it also builds on existing approaches. So SBTN didn't create itself a new methodology, but there was like more than 10 years old framework of IPBES. So they have used their proven methodology as a first step. In the second step, companies need to prioritize which business activities, which locations, which suppliers need to be focused on. So this allows them to focus on their attention resources. And first thing to do is define target boundaries, which means the set of activities and locations that are considered material. So it's kind of material to screening. So the locations and activities that are considered as material for target setting require targets. If they're not material, then they don't require targets. Now, in the next slide, please. Okay, then step 3. Yeah, step 2 I have already done. Step 3, please. Next slide. Yeah, in step 3, after prioritization is made and which locations are material and which raw materials or material is set out, then the targets need to be set out for the materials. So companies will begin to set out targets depending on their material impacts. And this target setting process then can be spread to 5 different dimensions. If it's material, land impact, terrestrial impact is material, then terrestrial impact target setting process should be triggered. If freshwater is material, then freshwater target setting process should be triggered. So there are 5 different aspects of nature: biodiversity, freshwater, ocean, terrestrial, and the 5th I didn't remember. I think we have already mentioned. Yeah, it was ecosystem, I guess. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Freshwater targets. For example, if freshwater is material for the company or a certain location, then freshwater target is set out in this way. It might be quantity, quality, pollution, ecosystem impact, or 11 different type of targets is possible for freshwater. For example, for quantity, a target might look like something like this. Company will reduce its water withdrawals in the basin. So the number of basins, so in the world, all basins are identified with unique ID numbers. So SBTN toolset has got this tool in the resources of SBTN website. So in the basin, let's say 15, 25 basin, to that much milliliter per year. By year, let's say 2035. This is kind of a target which is set for freshwater, water quantity, material company. Yeah, if it's not clear, we can discuss that in Q&A, I guess. I would like to conclude here slowly. So the rest of the slide deck is around giving different types of we can go to next slides quickly. For example, I'm giving an example of land targets, what it looks like. For example, company will have that much meter square of land manipulation decrease by that year, something like this. Yeah, so there are different types of targets in each aspect of nature, like freshwater, ocean, land targets, and there are like 11, 12 different types of targets in terms of each nature aspect. Yeah, I guess we can go to questions and read what people. Yeah, because this is kind of an infinite slide deck, like.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm going to stop to share
200.
that. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's.
Okay. And I believe we'll be sharing those slides just for the audience in case they want to look through the details.
Right.
I can start us off with the first question while people are entering theirs in the chat. So you said, Gokhan, that last decade may have been focused on greenhouse gas emissions, and this next decade is more focused on defining nature impacts. I was curious, who validates companies or organizations' claimed impacts to nature? Is that something SBTN does or outside consultants?
Mhm.
For example, if a company claims we reduced our pollution or certain materials in the water, who validates that?
Mhm. I mean, actually, SBTN has a service that's validating only targets, not achievements. For example, you can say, okay, I have a target. I want to decrease the land impact by that much percent by, let's say, 10% in 2030. And you can submit this target to SBTN and they validate it. But if you achieve or not, there's no one to validate. You can just disclose yourself, like it's a self-disclosure framework. So until governments, I don't know, set out some laws, there's no one to validate. It's like self-declaration, self-disclosures.
Okay, thank you.
Carbon is the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. Well, the GHG protocol often asks for a third-party validation of reporting that comes out of a company.
Mm.
And so part of that is they actually are making a testimonial that it's been looked at. And so I presume that would apply, meaning by the time data really gets up to SBTN, and I'll
Mhm.
use SBT it is actually most of it's been validated one way or another because most of the information isn't generated exclusively because SBTI needs it. It's because they needed it to do reporting either to government or municipalities or to some other forum, and it needs vetting. ESG, people can't make wild claims, and that would be misleading the public, particularly if they're a public company. So a lot of the validation occurs about achievement and current status at a lower level. It just gets elevated. And correct me if I'm wrong, Gokhan, but it's just that uh, SBTI's role is that they know sectors, they know the target for a whole sector, and they know how much a company should be performing at by way of reductions. And their basic
Mm.
source of information is IPCC, which is the UN's science organization related to climate science. So when they come out with these reports, that's an input. The SBTI and the whole network, all its constituent parts. Is that correct? Am I expressing it properly there?
Yeah, for example, uh, for carbon emissions, for example, there's a verification process which is
Hmm.
proven. So there's, for example, I'm ISO 64 068 and 7 auditors
Mhm.
certificated. So
Right.
I can verify a carbon, for example, the previous year's carbon emission reports, and this verification makes this report legit and accurate, etc. For SBTN, I do not know. Honestly, let me ask to the network. Uh, I don't know if there is such a certificate that's giving kind of authority like ISO 64006X is giving to us. But each country, it might differ. That's also, for example, in Germany, you need kind of governmental certificate or a specific yeah, for example, in Turkey, you need another thing. I know because it's my native country, another certificate and another exam. So, but SBTN, I don't know if there's a global or local one, because even SBTN standard is very recent, like, so I think it will be developed soon. Or let me raise this question in the network, please. I don't have a good answer, but I absolutely agree with Preston.
Yeah, a lot on the carbon side is validated beforehand. And there are anything that deals with finance has to be validated because of the investment implications, meaning someone has actually audited and said, an expert, this is a truthful declaration. So that it needs to be audited and vetted. What SBTI does really, and it would be probably propagated across all the other 4 areas, is that the target is being set based on the amount of emissions per your sector and the dates that which the IPCC has said we had to get to a certain level or we would actually lose control of the climate and all the other things. And so that's what they're doing. They're aligning it with what the IPCC has stated. So certain sectors, if it could be I'm in the garbage disposal industry, right? I have garbage dumps. They know how much GHG emissions are being emitted from that, how much methane, et cetera. And so they're able to tell anybody involved in that based on this output to the global community in general, you have to reduce by this amount and you're currently up here. You got to get down to here. And you have to do it in stages. And they do multi-year vetting of a plan to make sure you're on target, and they make sure what you indicate. No, this is what I understand as an action is not only consistent with that, but it's actually doable and rational. Meaning you're not doing things ad hoc that don't add up to some outcome, because they want you to look at things in 3 to 5 year increments all the way out to 2050. Is that what you understand as well? Uh, Yeah, so it's just again, they're taking the science, they're taking as much vetted information as they can get, and they know what the outputs of sectors are, and so they know what company goals should be. There's certain sectors that are just incredible polluters, so their nut typically tends to be very high. And when they do their GHG protocol reports, you'll know whether a company has taken action and started to reduce emissions versus someone who's recently decided they have to do it. And so the reduction target for one will be different than the other because they're looking at the sector in general and how all the players can collaboratively at the same point in time arrive at net zero at 2050. I don't know if maybe someone could paraphrase what I just said to make sure that I communicate it.
I think you did,
Yeah.
Preston. I do see
yeah.
another question in the chat.
Okay.
If we could get to that as well.
Sure.
Can you see it, Gokhan? Said, thank you for the presentation and detailed walkthrough between SBTN and TFND. How do you find the practice of offsetting, and do you see businesses have made substantial progress in their decarbonization efforts from some of the legacy now emerging frameworks and initiatives?
Yeah, great question. Offsetting will never replace real decarbonization efforts and nature reservation efforts. So because the scientific part is very clear, and companies need to prioritize reducing their actual impacts first. So that's why target setting is more important than offset or trading that off, let's say. So frameworks like SBTN and TNFD are aligned on this, I guess. So they emphasize action, place-based action, let's say, and aligning with the Earth's limit. Earth's limit is very important word here. Like, what's Earth's limit? And we are approaching that. Instead of approaching, we need to stop and go back. So this is more or less. So offsetting doesn't mean deceleration approaching to Earth's limits. It doesn't mean stopping, and it doesn't mean walking back. So, but on the other hand, climate action, nature action means that. So I never see offsetting as replacing the decarbonization or yeah, or ecosystem substitute, ecosystem initiatives substitute.
Thanks, Gokhan. Sandy, would you like to wrap up our session, or Preston?
Sandy goes first.
Certainly. Let me just get rid of a couple things here. We have a couple of minutes left. I would just like to point out that we have on our website, if I can find it, here's our ASCM website. If you go to eco-sustainability, here's our eco-sustainability page, inside of which is the curated website. I'd like to just point out a few things real quick. That first of all, everyone has free access to all of the documents, papers, and videos in all of these categories. If you go to sustainability planning, there's a few articles in here that give you more information about SBTN and SBTI. So take a look at that. There's a couple here that are really good. Here is a SBTN validation pilot summary report. There's a couple more down here that are my favorite ones. Here's the SBTI science-based target setting manual. Here's also a YouTube channel. And what this shows is videos on every subject about SBTI that you might be interested in. So please do check that out. And there's others in here as well that I think are interesting. The SBTI website as well. Tell you everything you need to know. And by all means, check out our website and let us know if you have any questions. Back to you.
Thanks, Sandy. Preston, was there anything you'd like to add?
Well, actually, Sandy kind of hit it for a minute there. Let me just see if I'm getting the right thing here.
You're going to talk about the upcoming presentation.
Yeah, yes. Well, we are going to go a bit mixed mode in May, mainly because we're having the conference. But in the conference itself, we have Bob Willard, who will be speaking. Bob is considered one of the foremost experts on sustainability in North America, and he has quite a strong background. He's going to be a speaker at the conference remotely. And we also will have a demonstration of En-ROADS, which is the simulation software developed by MIT and Sloan School. Climate Interactive is the one that's doing that. They're a nonprofit. And it's rather profound to see, how you can play with the different strategies and actions and how it genuinely will impact the outcomes and temperature reduction, etc., emission reduction. So everybody's welcome to look at that on our website. It's modestly priced as a conference, and there's 5 or 6 presentations. There's also some on workforce development and also on AI and all kinds of analytical tools. So it's anyone who's involved in supply chain and manufacturing will get benefit from attending. So there's an early discount for early registration by the end of the month. So I encourage everybody to go take a peek at it. And there's enough detail on there for you now to make a decision about all that. But again, it's It's going to cover two sustainability topics, two on analytics, and there'll be one on workforce development, which is a critical role right now. If you have to be part of a company that needs employees, you're probably noticing that the resource pool is getting smaller because of the boomer generation retiring. So mark that on your calendar, take a peek, and we hope to see you there. And well, in June, we'll probably come back with a webinar on plastics. Plastics is a big issue right now, but it's starting to gain momentum, and there'll be some agreements between nations, hopefully reached soon, and the pressure will be put on. One action related to plastics is the state of California is suing ExxonMobil, for example, for misleading people on the recyclability of plastics. So we'll have one that is multidimensional on plastics in June. So at any rate, I'll turn it back to Nick. You want to sign off or any final word? Thank you for organizing this, and thank Gokhan for taking time out of his busy schedule. And it's late at night there right now. It's past 10, so he's probably a little bit, yeah, he's probably fatigued. But thank you again. And we hope to see everybody shortly in the future. Nick?
Thanks for joining, everyone.
On
Okay.